Welcome to India Today's Buzz Around the World. United Kingdom's Indian origin Home Secretary Suella Braverman unveiled new plans to end child sexual abuse, after a number of reports into grooming gangs exploiting young girls. She said British Pakistani men are members of grooming gangs who are involved in pursuing, raping, drugging and harming vulnerable English girls. Her comments regarding the representation of British Pakistani men in grooming gangs have triggered controversy. Suella is often accused of being a coconut, which in British slang means she is brown on the outside but white on the inside. Braverman didn't refrain from highlighting British Pakistani perpetrators, saying political correctness has prevented those in authority from acting. Braverman wrote in an article of Daily Mail, "The time has come to right one of the greatest injustices seen in Britain in modern times. The systematic rape, abuse and exploitation of young girls by organised gangs of older men, and the disgraceful failure of the authorities to act despite ample evidence, is a stain on our country." The grooming gangs scandal stretches back many years and continues to this day. During last year's Conservative leadership contest, Rishi Sunak pledged that if he became Prime Minister he would make stamping out grooming gangs, and justice for their victims, a personal priority. The government will now make good on that promise. Braverman was referring to what are called the Pakistani grooming gangs in UK. These refer to a group of men of Pakistani origin who have been involved in the organised sexual abuse and exploitation of young girls, mainly of white British or Sikh heritage, in the UK. The abuse often takes the form of grooming, in which the men befriend and manipulate young and vulnerable girls, using drugs and alcohol to coerce them into sexual activity, often in exchange for gifts or money. The grooming gangs typically target girls who are from dysfunctional families, have a history of abuse, or are in care. They befriend them and gain their trust before subjecting them to sexual exploitation, which often includes gang rape, physical abuse, and threats to their families if they try to escape. The girls are often too afraid to report the abuse to the authorities or ignored when they do. The issue of Pakistani grooming gangs has been highly controversial and has led to heated debate about the intersection of race, religion, and crime in the UK. Critics argue that the gangs are a result of cultural differences and that the Pakistani community has not done enough to address the issue. Supporters of the Pakistani community argue that the issue is not specific to one community and that the problem is being used to stigmatize and demonize Pakistani men. According to multiple media reports, these gangs have been operating in the UK for decades, with the first cases coming to light in the early 2000s. The cases have been reported in several cities across the country, including Rotherham, Rochdale, Oxford, Telford, and Newcastle. Some of them came under media glare. Rotherham child sexual exploitation scandal that happened between 2010 to 2013, a report by Professor Alexis J. found that approximately 1,400 children were sexually exploited in Rotherham between 1997 and 2013, mostly by gangs of men of Pakistani origin. The report found that the authorities had failed to respond adequately to the issue due to concerns about racial tensions. Professor Alexis J. concluded that the majority of known perpetrators were of Pakistani heritage, including 5 men convicted in 2010. Operation Bullfinch, Oxford of 2012, 7 men of Pakistani origin were convicted of sexual offences, including rape and trafficking, against 6 girls aged between 11 and 15 in Oxford. The men were sentenced to a total of 95 years in prison. Rochdale child sex abuse ring of 2012, 9 men of Pakistani and Afghan origin were convicted of offences including rape and trafficking against girls as young as 13 in Rochdale. The men were sentenced to a total of 77 years in prison. Operation Sanctuary Scandal, Newcastle in 2017, a total of 18 men of mainly Pakistani and Bangladeshi origin were convicted of offences including rape, trafficking, and supplying drugs to vulnerable young women in Newcastle. The men were sentenced to a total of 180 years in prison. Telford child sex abuse scandal in 2018, a report by the Sunday Mirror found that up to 1,000 girls, some as young as 11, had been sexually exploited in Telford over a period of 40 years by mainly men of Southern Asian heritage. The report found that authorities had failed to respond adequately to the issue due to concerns about political correctness. The inquiry into the Telford abuse scandal, which published its report in 2022, found police dismissive of claims of abuse, with one saying, "These girls had chosen to go with, I don't know, bad boys." There has been criticism of the response of law enforcement agencies to grooming gangs, with some arguing that the authorities have been slow to respond to the issue, or have been reluctant to investigate cases due to concerns about political correctness or the potential for racial tensions. There has been controversy over the way in which the media reports on grooming gangs has also been the subject of debate. Some critics argue that the media has sensationalized the issue, and has focused too heavily on the ethnic and religious backgrounds of the perpetrators, which could contribute to negative stereotypes and increase tensions between communities. But now, after 30 years of simmering of this issue, the topic has taken center stage, with leaders who are children of immigrants are now spearheading the action against it. Do tell us what you think about this video in the comments section, and for more news updates, subscribe to India Today.